Well, guten Morgen. Good morning, everyone. As President for this year, can I warmly welcome you today. I'm sure you've been having very fruitful discussions, much learning, but also good contributions so far in the summit. And as I say, may I welcome you warmly to this important, but also I'm sure very interesting opening ministerial session. In particular, may I recognise and welcome fellow ministers from around the globe and many distinguished guest speakers we're going to have in this policy discussion, facilitated so well by Pat Cox very soon. Can I underscore the importance of the International Transport Forum for us all? It is increasingly the premier multimodal transport forum that is increasing its reach around the globe and has, I think, a very clear and rightfully so focus on research and policy for the assistance and betterment of countries, companies and citizens. I want to introduce to you the declaration you should have before you decided on earlier this morning in the closed ministerial session, and thank the member countries for the fruitful discussion in relation to it. Can I take a chair's, if you like, liberty and underscore from the New Zealand perspective the absolute critical importance of transport, trade and tourism for a country such as ours, the most remote developed country in the world that literally lives or dies on the quality, the efficiency, the productivity of its transport, and note the real need for countries to be open and innovative when it comes to transport, trade and tourism, always seeking to learn and get better. Thank, as I say, the members and the Secretariat for their work in preparing that declaration, which those of you who haven't seen it before will be able to read at your leisure. A number of other important decisions were made during the closed ministerial session, and first amongst equal in those decisions, can I highlight very warmly 3 new members of the ITF: Israel, Argentina and Morocco. This really does enhance and increase the global reach of the ITF. Morocco is the ITF's first African nation state, Israel the second in the Middle East, and Argentina the second South American country. Let's show our congratulations to these countries as new members of the ITF. We are, as I say, very soon about to go into an open, in every sense of that word, policy discussion. 2015 is, of course, a critical year for ensuring the world works together to deliver a successful new climate change agreement in Paris in December. Without wanting to in any way preempt that discussion, can I again exercise the chair's right and note that key conundrum, it seems to me, about how to, in light of this year's theme, maintain connectivity that's so important for countries around the world, and indeed enhance and improve it, whilst also reducing emissions and the other impacts of climate change. I'm sure it's going to be, as I say, an open, a very participative, perhaps even lively discussion that we engage in, and I for one am very much looking forward to it. With those few opening remarks, can I warmly ask Secretary General Jose Vegas of the International Transport Forum to give some high-level introductory remarks to help frame our discussion this morning.
Thank you, Minister Bridges. On behalf of all the International Transport Forum and its Secretariat, let me express our sincere gratitude to New Zealand for holding the presidency this year. Your country has led our organization through an exciting period in which policy discussions gained a new importance in our meetings and during which this year's summit on the theme of transport, trade and tourism was prepared. Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues, we are very pleased that so many of you have joined us for this exchange and on the walks of the sector. This is the 4th year that ITF member ministers have opened their session to guest ministers and all summit participants, thus enriching the dialogue on the summit theme. This year, ITF ministers have just welcomed 3 new member countries to the Forum family, Morocco, Argentina and Israel, thus expanding the geographical reach of the ITF, so a special word of welcome to the representatives of these countries. Can I also extend a warm welcome to our guest ministers from Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, Vietnam and South Africa. We are delighted that you have joined us here in Leipzig, and we are grateful for the broadened geographic perspective with which you are enhancing our discussions here in Leipzig. The topic of today's session is mitigating the transport-related climate change impacts of trade and tourism. It is clear to all of us that climate change is a very serious challenge to our society in general, and in particular to the transport sector, where success in mitigating carbon emissions has been less than complete, and the technical difficulties and costs of adaptation to ensure the resilience of our infrastructure and operations through extreme weather conditions will be considerable. The scope and reach of the Lima-Paris Action Agenda that we will be exploring today give an idea of the challenges upon and before us and the initiatives underway and envisaged. In this context, I'm pleased to welcome the initiative leaders who are leading the way along the path from the Lima's COP20 to Paris COP21. Trade and tourism are vital components of the economy and welfare of our countries, and it is our duty to discuss and move towards the transport policy options that will allow the full continuation of that role without jeopardizing the societal efforts in addressing climate change. This will only be possible through the development of collaborative processes of knowledge sharing and thorough assessment of the available option involving multiple relevant stakeholders. Please allow me to thank Monsieur Jean-Dominique Senard and Mr. Georg Kapsch for their presence today and for their willingness to share their experience and vision and reflect with ministers and summit participants on how to formulate and tackle these challenges and opportunities for the transport sector. ITF is indeed at its best when working together with stakeholders from government, industry and civil society across the transport sector. We will continue to pursue opportunities for mutual dialogue and collaborative action to meet the challenges facing the sector today. I look forward to this discussion and thank you all again to meet the challenges. I also want to thank the presence of Violeta Bulc, the EC Commissioner, Klaus Timmels from the World Bank, and Eva Molnar from UNECE in joining us here. So I look forward to the discussion and thank you all again for your participation today, all of you, Mr. President.
May I now formally hand over to Pat Cox, who will so ably facilitate this important discussion.
Sorry?
So thank you very much indeed, Minister Simon Bridges and Jose Viegas for that introduction. We have the possibility now to move in the direction of focusing on COP21 and in particular to listen to the introductory remarks of the Secretary of State for Transport of France, Monsieur Alain Vidales. Monsieur le Ministre, vous avez la parole.
Mesdames et Messieurs. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, General Secretary, Chairman, industry leaders, Mr. Bakunin has just sent us Mr. Ban Ki-moon has just sent us a message about COP21, and this is to keep global warming below 2 degrees and to avoid further warming. It is also about the resilience of our society. It is a huge challenge for our society. We will receive COP21 in Paris, and we want to set an example in the fight against global warming. France has developed a new energy policy with a draft law for green growth. That law will be passed in summer, and there are ambitious goals in that law and various measures in order to create links between transport, growth, and the environment. We work together with other countries on this alliance. Namely, there should be a mandatory agreement, and this is a priority for us. All countries will present their national contributions. It will also be about financial measures and about a transition to low-carbon societies. And there is an agenda of solutions. And this last point is about huge partnerships in order to manage that transition to a low-carbon society. This is about the spirit of the United Nations in the summit, in the climate summit in September 2014 in Peru, and Ban Ki-moon and his collaborators passed the climate agenda. The initiatives which were started in New York should be followed up on. It's about fostering new partnerships, but also to make sure that NGOs and other stakeholders come into play. As far as France is concerned, we have to make sure that there are mandatory commitments. It will have to be tangible commitments with short-term, medium-term, and long-term impact. Of course, we will listen to each other together with the presidency and our partners so that we can make sure that we fulfill the expectation of the world community. And I look forward to the ITF session. As I said, listening is important, and to listen to what others have to say, because transport has an important role to play in this agenda of solutions. Transport, of course, is a cause of emissions, namely 15% of emissions worldwide, but means of transport are very important also for measures which can be taken also by NGOs, but also other players. There is a lot of innovation in transport. This is about new technologies, means of transport, technology, but also service provision and new governance models and the behavior of people, behavioral change. A lot can be developed here. Urbanism, urban planning, energy, jobs and social innovation are the watchwords. At the New York summit, lots of initiatives were triggered, especially in aviation. But it's also making means of transport more efficient, rail transport namely, and also e-mobility is key. But also cargo traffic, green traffic. It's not too late to initiate a further change. Large international organizations, AIPC or the Organization for Maritime Traffic, could adopt those topics and further work on them. The involvement of the corporate sector was seen at the Business Climate Summit last week in Paris. This is about commitments of big fleets which have to be developed. It's also about initiatives for further capacity enhancement. It's about e-mobility, but also about societal change, development in society, and solutions for bikes, for instance. It is about different modes of transport which can be developed in order to foster sustainable developments. It is about sustainability and a green spirit in our societies. It will be about measures for climate change. We have to flesh out that change. This is also about content, about transport, and transport will have its place on the agenda. It will be about solutions which we have to find, and we have to bundle our forces. After COP21, there will be other international events so that the players can work together and continue to work together. It's about the Velocité World Congress in Nantes from the 2nd to 5th of June. This is about the bike as a means of transport. This is in Nantes, beginning of June. I would like to appreciate the commitment of all players in aviation and their contribution to lowering CO2 emission and pollution. There is a summit from the year 15th to the 21st of June in Le Bourget, and there is a special event on the 18th of June, COP21 from the point of view of aviation. That will be the topic, and it will be about the impact of COP21 on aviation. There is a conference in Bordeaux about a smart means of transport, and all ministers of ITF will be invited so that you can take a part in that event in Bordeaux. I would like to thank all those who will participate. I would like to thank Ban Ki-moon, who has triggered this initiative, but I would also like to thank all players who were active in the Paris process, especially Michelin and Kopsch. We have to fight climate change, and it would be a good opportunity for ministers here to say what their expectations are, because this is an open and inclusive process. Hence, I look forward to your participation and thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We have talked about inclusive solutions, fostering ITF, and I would like to thank you for this contribution.
I am pleased to send greetings to this year's International Transport Forum. In September, world leaders will gather at the United Nations to adopt a universal post-2015 development agenda. In December, governments will meet in Paris to agree meaningful collective action on climate change. Sustainable transport is a common thread. It is time to reshape the world's transport systems for a cleaner, safer, and more sustainable future. Last year, I created a high-level advisory group on sustainable transport to work with all stakeholders to promote sustainable transport systems. On every continent, public, private, and civil society actors are working for change. The commitment and expertise of this forum is helping to make a difference. I am very grateful for the contributions many of you made at my climate summit. Your actions can help the world travel more quickly down a low-carbon pathway. However, all of us must do more. The global thermostat continues to rise. Climate impacts are increasing. I urge all of you to accelerate your efforts. Find new green solutions. Be a champion within your industry and urge others to commit to a new sustainable transport future. You help connect the world. With your help, we can make a world of difference.
We are grateful, of course, to the Secretary-General for those remarks and that encouragement. Let me move now just to give you a little roadmap, a feel for the balance of our session this morning. We're going to hear two presentations from CEOs. after which we can take some comments or questions. So if you have any comments or questions, please indicate, and we would be happy to facilitate those. We will then have a first round of ministerial interventions. A number of you have already indicated that you wish to take the floor, and of course that will be accommodated. After that first round of ministerial interventions, we will listen to some of the initiatives of which we've heard this morning, the Lima Paris Action Agenda, and 4 of the initiative leaders will briefly address us. Again, you have the possibility to make short comments or to pose questions. That will be followed by a second round of ministerial interventions, and we will close out the session around 12:40. You will then be invited to remain in this room. Those of you who have been invited to do so will know already, for a family photo. So let me proceed, if I may, by introducing our first Chief Executive. That is Jean-Dominique Sénard. Jean-Dominique Sénard is the CEO of the Michelin Group of France, the global tire company. He joined the group as CFO in 2005. Under his leadership, the company is very committed to sustainability, taking part in the Carbon Disclosure Project, part of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and he has led the development of an ecosystem globally on the question of sustainable mobility, which is exactly our topic today. Jean-Dominique, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much, Pat. Mr. President, Excellencies, Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me in this important forum today. Obviously, the theme which is developed here, transport, trade, tourism, resonates tremendously for a company like Michelin. Comes to transport, obviously with our tires, which are critical enablers for vehicle energy efficiency and safety, we equipped roughly 15% of all vehicles riding on Earth, would it be cars, trucks, buses, trams, bikes, you name it, without forgetting, of course, aircrafts. But basically, we view the mobility of people and freight transport as the cornerstones of trade and development. Demand is high, but must be met. At the same time, energy intensity and negative externalities must be reduced. Seamlessness in intermodality must become a reality. When it comes to trade, we ship 3 million tons of tires every year by land, sea, and air, and we receive the same tonnage of raw materials from all over the world. So we see free trade as an absolutely essential condition for spreading innovation, creating jobs, and sharing value. Global wealth creation in the past few decades speaks by itself. Obviously, current intra-regional and inter-regional free trade agreement discussions, together with global standard settings, must be accelerated. Lastly, when it comes to tourism, we all know it represents 9% of global GDP and is bound to grow. It is a fabulous tool of cultural and economic enrichment and mutual understanding. We know it. Maps, guides, and information sharing have been part of Michelin's offering for more than a century. Against this backdrop, and following up on the remarks from Minister Bridges and Minister Vidalis, as well as those of ITF Secretary General Jose Viegas and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, I will urge today for audacity, enhanced innovation, and cooperation, convinced as I am that we must wholeheartedly work for both job-rich growth and what the United Nations call human security. Past growth scenarios have led to the pitfalls we all are aware of and that need to be corrected. Society today looks to us not to choose between growth, health, peace, and the environment. Last week's Paris Business and Climate Summit, 200 days before COP21, convinced me that a lot of business leaders share the belief that now is the time to act decisively for smart growth and not for more of the same, leveraging the fabulous opportunities that technical, social, and political evolution offer to us today. At the upcoming Paris COP21, I hope that governments will send a clear sign that the 450 ppm scenario is what they, as representative of common good, want to enforce. This means, at world level, leveling off greenhouse gas emissions in the early 2020s, achieving massive reductions by 2050, and reaching near-zero net emissions by the end of the century. To enable these three-step energy and behavior mutation, while in the same time fostering the economy, three key initiatives are required now. First, decide on ambitious long-term mitigation targets and provide some visibility on the major economic and political instruments chosen to achieve them. Two, enact policies to facilitate investments in the low gas emission economy and faster rotation of assets to foster and enable innovation while at the same time maintaining a level playing field. And three, educate citizens on the fact that greenhouse gas intensive solutions will in the long term be the more expensive option. And also, the low carbon transition and the new economic paradigms, for example, importance of ISIT, emergence of collaborative economy, will bring a renaissance in economic vitality and purchasing power. One key signal would be to universally converge on the determination to set a value, or values to start with, for CO2. Business calls for this as it is the only way to include climate preservation in universally accepted economic mechanism. Can this drastic transition be achieved without a major contribution of the transport mobility sector? The answer is obviously no. Therefore, our sector must exercise leadership in fully embracing its role as economic and well-being driver and playing its major part in decoupling economic dynamism from emission growth. My message here is that we can do it. We need to work together to simultaneously unleash transport, trade and tourism developments and at the same time set very significant limitations on transport energy intensity and emission. Contrary to what many prospective scenarios still contend today, the learnings of our last edition of Challenge Bibendum in Chengdu, that was in China last November, where more than 200 private and public institutions met and agreed on a renewed vision of mobility. They show that halving emissions while doubling tons per kilometer and passenger per kilometer is feasible at the 2050 horizon. To get there, we advocate that while eliminating barriers to free trade and counter-innovative policies like fossil fuel subsidies, 5 game changers be activated in a coordinated way. Together, let's first set very ambitious CO2 emission reduction trajectories in all transportation modes and for the sector as a whole. This will foster technical and behavioral innovation. 2, establish ultra-low emission zones in the big cities. This will change transportation behaviors towards more efficient co-modality, e-mobility, and soft transport modes. The London decision in 2014 to move to ultra-low emission zones in 2020, after creating a low emission zones in 2028, is an indication of how fast change can be introduced. 3, redesign last-mile freight delivery. 2 reasons for focusing on last-mile delivery. While it is bound to be the fastest-growing transportation sector in the next years, it is currently a main culprit on congestions and pollution in cities. 4, engineer creative door-to-door solutions for people, complementing today's station-to-station solutions. These are the key to effective multimodal use by most urban dwellers, and they are also a response to facilitate access to mobility to all. Also, there are a fantastic opportunity to boost proximity services, bike and car sharing, autonomous vehicles, you name it. Of course, intelligent transport systems, the so-called ITS, will play a very leading role. And 5, mobilize private funding. Let's not be naive. All the above requires huge investments in the future for mass transit that public funding cannot cover any longer. It requires mobilizing new ecosystems and activating new business models. All these that do not rest on the sole shoulders of the public sector. The success of this 5-pronged program, where states as well as cities are at the forefront of disruption decisions. The success is based on knowledge that investing in innovation for rapidly growing populations, as it is obviously the case in urban circumstances, is the surest path to economic growth and job creation. In this spirit, and in line with the wishes expressed by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, we at Michelin have decided to call upon our Challenge Bibendum ecosystem, industry, finance, ISIT services, to participate in the COPE process, particularly through the Lima Paris Action Agenda. Together with SOCAT, in perfect complementary of membership and action, that is private and public, we announced yesterday the creation of the PPMC, which is the Paris Process on Mobility and Climate, an open public-private initiative to strengthen the voice of the sustainable transport community up to and beyond COP21. Our joint initiative includes national and regional dialogues before COP21 to relay common messages and share knowledge, events, and activities during the session, including a full multimodal transport day and full support to the Lima Paris Action Agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, convinced of the feasibility of ambitious targets, we want to contribute to realizing the global agreement on climate change that empowers the transport sector with your unmitigated support. We want to take visible action on climate change and the transformation of mobility, and we want to assume a leadership role in innovative societal responsibility. Through our participation in the ITF Corporate Partnership Board and the PPMC initiative I just mentioned, we are ready to gear up in our cooperation with you to move the world of mobility. Thank you very much for your attention, and of course I look forward for the future steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Dominique. If any of the ministers or delegations would like to ask a question or make a comment, if you just place your card on its side so that we can see you and call you in, we would be happy to do that. Jean-Dominique, may I begin with one or two questions arising from your remarks? You've twice in the course of your speech insisted on the need in political terms for clear signals and visible instruments. Can you just develop that theme in terms of the business community forming its own strategy and developing its own policies? Why that clarity of signal and instruments matters so much?
Well, basically, and to be short, obviously we need clear signals to organize our future. it's all about long-term investments, as you can imagine. We at Michelin, when we invest for the future, we invest for the next 40 years, when we build a new plant, for example, but not only. So we need visibility, we need clear views. This is why I mentioned the obvious necessity to have a price for TO2 now. I was surprised, by the way, in Paris the other week, that all the business representatives were sort of sharing that view. It was not the case 2 years ago. So the good surprise is there. We should run on this opportunity because we have to be able to integrate this notion of price in our future investments. That's the way it happens. It's a good way to summarize, I would say, what I mean by signals and visibility.
Could I ask you also on one of the themes you touched on? You're speaking in this context to ministers with national responsibilities, and you've recognised the need for that kind of partnership between business, civil society and governments. But you also emphasised the question of cities engaging. Again, can I ask you to develop a little bit? You talked about big cities. Why do you focus on that?
Well, basically because big cities are, I would say, the direction of the future. I mean, obviously everybody knows around this table and in this room that growth will come in the future from cities. If we only take Africa, I mean, the prospect of growth in Africa is going to be through urbanization. And we're probably going to have tremendous cities over there in the next decades. In Chengdu last year, we were typically in a big city in China, and the transport issue was so big. Everybody was really, concerned. And so I'm absolutely sure that big cities must play a role. They must have, I would say, their say, and they can trigger some significant regulations to get to the sort of proposals that I mentioned in my speech. But they can't be alone. And the national level must be also involved to set the framework, I would say, of what the future could be. We don't necessarily need a tremendous amount of legislation. We need a framework, and then the private sector can work on its own. We can do our very best, because obviously it's the interest of everybody.
A final question on something which, again, was a core theme that you touched on, that we don't have to choose between growth and sustainability, that we can choose both. It's not either or. You mentioned the possibility of, by 2050, and of course subject to a lot of work to be achieved, that emissions could be halved, even as the kilometrage of freight or passengers could double. Is that utopia, or from the connections and work that you've done talking about your ecosystem, do you believe it is truly doable and achievable?
Well, two things, Pat. If I've been so vocal about not opposing growth and mobility, it's because it's the purpose of our company for the past 125 years. So, I mean, honestly, it would be terrible to say otherwise. And we strongly believe with passion that they never oppose each other. The problem is that we today have to face reality, and the ministers have said the responsibility of the transport sector in the greenhouse gas emissions in the world today. We just have to face that and make sure that we can bring everything what's possible through innovation to settle the matter. And for your second point, we now are able to say that technologies exist. They are there. Almost all of them are there. It's a matter of implementation and, again, having the general environment and framework necessary to get them implemented. My answer to you is the technologies are there. We know where we're going, and we know we're going in the next 10 years. We know the route, the avenues, so let's do it. There is certainly never should come back on the table opposing transport, mobility to growth. Absolutely not.
Jean-Dominique Senard, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your presence here today. Before I move to our next speaker, if I may make a slight change of schedule to do with other schedules here, I'm going to, excuse me, we have a question. My apologies, I didn't see. Oui, c'est le ministre marocain, c'est ça?
Ouais, c'est ça.
Vous-
Chairman, thank you. Just a very brief question based on the intervention by Mr. Sinar. Indeed, it is a fact that we have an increased efficiency of exchange and trade and tourism, and it all depends on whether or not we can influence certain factors. For example, the access to services or other issues. So it is true, we need visibility vis-à-vis governments, but apart from that, what can be done by governments so that there is convergence between the public and the private sector so that we can act within the interest of citizens? Minister, I think it's a very important question. This is about the role of the different operators and stakeholders and providers in the transport sector on the one hand and the role of governments on the other. The governments should use their policies and their policy making so as to maintain certain regulations that define a framework, and that is the framework within which we act and do our profession. This would be the right direction. We need a framework and we need stability for this framework. Certain elements, such as CO2 prices, for example, have to be stable. And if we do not manage to introduce that on an international level, then at least we have to make it happen on a regional basis. We always have to act in the interest of companies, of course. We have to make sure that our companies are competitive. This is always a very delicate and difficult and important question. But if governments are to take on a catalytic role, if they are supposed to define a general framework, then businesses and companies active in mobility can find their own way towards mobility. Companies have to have the liberty to do what they want to do because they are the ones in charge of innovation. So we have to do that within a certain framework. And this is why I would like to underline once again the importance of public-private partnerships, because it's the perfect framework for our way into the future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Minister for the question.
Ministerial intervention of this session, the Minister of Transport of the Russian Federation, Mr. Sokolov.
Спасибо, уважаемый господин председательствующий.
Sorry, we seem to have a translation problem, but here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. As for globalization and tourism, this is a sector for the future, and of course this is also true for the development of the transport sector as a service sector. And of course, transport systems have to get ready. They have to be prepared and act according to the current trends. Yesterday, I already gave a current example that shows how transport has an effect not only on the environment, but how it also fosters tourism in relation with, for example, international sports events such as the Olympics or the University Olympics or the soccer championship in our country. But I think we should not only focus on innovation projects that are implemented within the framework of these events, but we should also pay attention to the legislatory work. The Russian Federation is currently modifying its legislation in such a way that tourism can be actively developed. This includes cruise ship passengers, for example, being allowed to enter our country without a visa. Visa issues are an obstacle to tourism, so this makes them important. They have an importance for the future, and I hope that other governments will come up with similar ideas. The environment in big cities is also important for tourists, not only in Europe, but in the Asian or Pacific regions, and the use of ecological means of transport can play an important role. In Moscow, our Russian capital, most modes of transport are also available in an electric form. I'm not only talking about the metro that allows 7 million people to travel across the city per day. Our Ministry of Transport develops strategies and legislation, and in doing so they want to translate this electrical system to other cities, and they want to replace the traditional drivers of the transport sector. Until 2030, we want to achieve the goal of reducing our emissions by 60% in terms of passenger car emissions, and it is our ambition to introduce alternative fuels and increase their use by 35%. Then there is another agenda where we make a transition to gas in municipal transport, and today's discussion of the questions such as green transport systems is a future that is directed at the future, because it affects the future of our transport system, and of course it reflects today's trends, and in my opinion not only within the framework of today's plenary session but also within the framework of the roundtable talks. We understand the question in a better and a deeper way. We have tried to work on a common way of understanding, and we will contribute to this common trend. Thank you for your attention.
Spasiba, Minister. It's interesting to listen to your remarks. I think they fit very much in the themes we've been discussing: clear government signals, innovations in public policy, and an emphasis on the role of large urban centres in contributing to reducing greenhouse gases. Let me turn, if I can, to our next CEO speaker. That is Mr. Jörg Kapsch of the Kapsch Traffic.com AG in Austria. The Kapsch company specializes in intelligent transport systems. Jörg Kapsch has been the CEO since 2002. He's also a very active business leader, and since 2012 has been president of the Federation of Austrian Industry. Mr. Kapsch, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It's of course a great pleasure being invited here and having the opportunity to give some remarks from a point of view of the Kapsch Group, which is a globally acting company in electronic toll collection, traffic management and cooperative systems. On the other hand, please accept one or the other of my remarks as a representative of the industry as a whole, due to the fact that I'm the president of the Austrian industry. Well, climate change is one of the core challenges of today's world. And consequently, we are all interested and we need to cope with this issue very, very intensely, but without concurrently, and this primarily applies to the European Union, harming the European industry and increasing unemployment. And as you already mentioned, I'm fully in line with you that growth and environmental protection and reduction of carbon dioxide is not a contradiction. But it requires a very, very sensitive approach from the European perspective, at the same time motivating other regions to join Europe on this demanding and future-oriented path. Unilateral, and that's what I say from the perspective of the industry, unilateral and unconditional European targets are not the right choice. We need a global fair effort-sharing approach, and I really do hope that this will work out in Paris. And it's all about carbon leakage. That's an issue we have to care. Anyway, who can contribute to reach these challenging targets? Well, the industry in the past has already overproportionally contributed, whereas the transport and traffic sector on the one hand side and the private households have not to this extent and are still lagging behind. And 2/3 of all emissions globally are generated in cities, and more than 50% of the global population increasing is currently living in cities. But due to the theme of the forum today, let me please address transport-related technological and business model-driven innovations which could and will certainly foster environmental friendly and friendly transport and traffic on the one hand side and policy making on the other side to mitigate transport and traffic related climate impacts, to increase convenience for the individual and for the society as a whole. There exists a variety of options in all transport means. There are lots of instruments like tolling, like traffic management, like intelligent mobility solutions, which are using data from various sources. And data is a core, and the usage of data will be a core issue in the future. And on the other hand, you have the tendency from the highway to the city. We have lots of traffic management systems installed on highways. We have hardly any in downtown urban areas. And it's about, and that was already addressed, about the last mile. Because, for instance, in Vienna, and Vienna is not the most crowded city in the world, 40% in downtown area, 40% of the traffic is just created by looking for parking spaces. And that's what we have to cope with. On the other hand, we have to find an appropriate combination between individual and public transport. We as a global company are very much engaged in technology, in standardization, and in creating future-oriented business models. And we intend to help and to support to cut greenhouse gases, particularly related to transport and traffic. Today's world today's world is a very complex, a globally linked, interlinked, and highly dynamic world. And this forces us to generate a highly flexible and open set of rules, because what is right today may be wrong tomorrow. So we need lots of flexibility in the framework. One is obvious: traffic and transport is the backbone of the economy, and the economy is the basis for welfare. Thus, it's not about reducing or restricting traffic and transport, because this would end up in a decrease of the GDP, and that's what we all do not really want to foster. But it's about, first, increasing the efficiency of traffic and transport, and there is a huge potential by implementing the necessary infrastructure, by internalizing external costs, by intensifying compliance and enforcement, and by changing the behavior of the people. And how can one change the behavior of the people? By both increasing the convenience for the people on the one hand side, and on the other side by tolling, by making traffic a bit more expensive. Therewith, we will be able to optimize traffic flows in downtown areas by smart parking, by low emission zones, or did you say very low emission zones, and combining the different traffic means in an optimized way, which means an optimization of multimodal traffic, especially in downtown areas. Secondly, to improve safety tools. Again, intensify compliance and enforcement, and deal with the issues of security, liability, and privacy, and private driver assistance by vehicle-to-infrastructure systems, vehicle-to-vehicle systems, and of course cooperative systems. Now, what are the policy needs we see? First, we need consistency, stability, and predictability of policy making. We need a regulatory framework which is smart, simple, and on a very general level. The what is the responsibility of politicians, the how is the responsibility of the industry. And that's what we especially could learn from the United States, because they are proceeding this way. And this often gets mixed up in the European Union. Who is responsible for what and who is responsible for the how? But this framework is vital for the private sector, for innovation, because we need stability in order to invest in innovation, and on the other hand, it's important for the deployment of business models. Everything has to be based on business models. And this means specifically market-oriented patterns in policy making. It means hardly any bureaucracy, and it means a swift introduction of cooperative systems. In-vehicle intelligence is widely existing. Infrastructure lags behind. But cooperative systems based on infrastructure will be a game changer in traffic and transport. Secondly, engage cities, but leave flexibility to them. Don't restrict them, because there is no single solution that fits each and every city, because cities are very different. Remove legal barriers and don't set a binding, strict framework. The industry will develop solutions that are interoperable and fit the specific needs of the specific traffic means and cities. And of course, foster ITS services. So all in a nutshell, at the end, ITS will be both. It will be a driver of innovation, and that's what Europe needs. A driver of innovation for a sustainable traffic and transport, and on the other hand, it will be a contributor to reach the challenging emission goals. And politics and politicians, and on the other side, the industry, are asked to cooperate very tightly, because one without the other will not be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jörg Kapsch. Again, if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, if you can indicate with your nameplate, and you're welcome to do that. Mr. Kapsch, listening to your comment at the outset, you made an appeal for a truly global approach and expressed a clear anxiety about what you called unilateral approaches with rules. Could I ask you to develop that theme a little bit, since it seems to be that the European Union has already set its approach?
Certainly. Thank you very much for this question, because, this is not what I answer from the point of view of my company, but from the point of view of the industry. In the end, it's all about carbon leakage. Europe set very challenging goals. That's okay, that's fine. But at the same time, they shouldn't be set unilaterally and unconditionally without taking into consideration what the rest of the world is doing. Because we would end up in moving our industry out of Europe to other regions where we have lower standards. So this is counterproductive in both. First, in losing jobs in Europe, and on the other hand, increasing emissions around the world. So that's why I'm really against, and the entire industry is against, unilateral and unconditional goals.
Turning more to the enterprise level and the messages that you gave, you talked about having much smarter cars, but not in a long while much smarter infrastructure. and about the need for what you call cooperative ITS. Could you explain in plain language what that cooperative ITS is, and what would the smart car, smart user, smart infrastructure triangle look like?
Well, I'll try to do, that's not easy to do it in the 3 or 4 sentences, but I'll try to do my best. Lots of cars are meanwhile equipped with GPS, with GSM, with LTE equipment, so that they easily can communicate. But we have a real lack of infrastructure, and there are mainly two different technologies that are not competing each other. One is the mobile phone industry, which could be used for convenience applications, and the other one is 5.9 gigahertz technology, which requires, of course, infrastructure, which is primarily for safety and security applications. And this combination would be an optimum, but the prerequisite for making it successful is a very, very swift implementation of the required infrastructure, and there is one pilot project which is a corridor running from Amsterdam to Vienna, and there is also starting a bit in France already. So if we could speed up the implementation of the infrastructure, this would be to the benefit of the environment as well as to the benefit of the users.
Thank you. In terms of the toolbox, as you've described it in very brief terms, you've referenced there the Amsterdam-Vienna corridor. Can you just describe again, if it's an interesting pilot project of this combination of smart car, smart infrastructure, at what stage of development is this project? I'm sure various ministries or ministers could be interested at looking into the toolbox to see what can they take from it.
Well, this is a project, and the advantage of this project is that it's including different states, different nations all over Europe, because one of our core problems is that we have different legislation in each and every country in regards to safety, security, liability, privacy, etc., etc. So this project could be both. An example for a harmonization of law on the one hand side, and a harmonization of applications and technology on the other side.
Thank you very much, your capture. I don't see any of the ministers offering at the moment. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your presentation. It's much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let me turn, if I can now, to a number of our ministerial interventions, and first invite the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State of the United Kingdom, Mr. Robert Goodwill, MP.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. Certainly the transport system, trade and tourism are key to the United Kingdom economy. Indeed, I agree with Herr Kapsch that it is only by having a successful growing economy that we can invest in green technologies. The United Kingdom is strongly committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the economy, and we have some of the most ambitious targets in the world. The United Kingdom already has domestic legislation, the Climate Change Act, which requires the government to deliver an 80% reduction in total emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050 compared to 1990 levels. A quarter of domestic carbon emissions are from transport, and we are committed to ensuring that the transport sector plays a full part in delivering the emissions reductions needed to meet these targets. And indeed, our first 5-year carbon budget has been met, and we are on track to achieve our ambitions for the medium term, although we really understand in the long term there are some challenges, both political and technological. I was very pleased to see in the local newspaper our colleague Minister Dobrindt in a BMW i3, and in the UK we have a £500 million package of measures which will support the market in ultra-low emission vehicles. In fact, we're leading the way in developing these technologies. We'll be providing support towards the purchase of vehicles for consumers, grants towards the necessary infrastructure, and match funding for research and development projects. And we are just beginning to see a real change in the pace of take-up of low-emission vehicles in the UK, with uptake now ahead of forecast and accelerating. In 2014, the UK moved from 4th to 1st place in the European Union league table of new ultra-low emission vehicle registrations, and 1 in 4 electric vehicles bought in Europe was built in the United Kingdom. Of course, this is only half the solution. The other half of the problem is to have sustainable electricity generation. We also want to help tourists and commuters alike to get around in a healthier and more sustainable way, and we're investing over £200 million to double the number of journeys made by bicycle. We know that cycling saves the economy £128 million per year in reduced absenteeism, and for each additional cyclist, the benefit to the economy is £500 per annum. In addition, we have a major rail electrification programme, as well as a brand new high-speed rail network in the pipeline. So we all must play our part as leaders in the international community on these issues, not only embracing the opportunity of COP21, but also at the International Maritime Association to reduce ships' contribution to emissions and climate change, and in aviation, we need a global-based market measure which will be developed to tackle this level of emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that very interesting presentation on the initiatives taken in the United Kingdom. Let me invite now the First Deputy Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine, Mr. Vladimir Schulmeister.
Thank you. On behalf of the government of Ukraine, I'd like to thank Mr. President for inviting us and General Secretary and Secretariat for the invitation and for the hospitality. I'd like to talk today about the situation in Ukraine and what's happening now with the infrastructure and transport in Ukraine. Our young government, which is now 6 months old, we found infrastructure of Ukraine in quite a difficult situation, where because of the war on the east, which is caused by the Russian Federation invasion and by the temporary occupied territory of Crimea, we have quite difficult situation with the drop in transport flows, in drop of transit, and therefore it's quite a challenge for us to restructure the transport corridors which go through Ukraine. Another obstacle in the development of the infrastructure in Ukraine, we see that the infrastructure is quite exhausted, amortized, and there were hardly any investments in the transportation system during last years. One more issue we have is corrupted corporate culture, which is one of the most important subjects we have to battle and to introduce European values. Here I would like to stress that last year Ukraine as a country and our people, common people, they have showed their willingness to join Europe, and I'm really happy that our people, Ukraine, have shown to the whole world that they are prepared to sacrifice their lives to join European Union and to join European values. Therefore, as Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine, we set up a strategic plan of development which includes first of all, to open sky, and in this direction I'm asking also European Commission to help us in opening sky for Ukraine. We do our utmost to join as soon as possible this open sky agreement. On the roads infrastructure, this week I'm proud to announce that this week we started first concession road project in the west of Ukraine, which will connect our western cities with Poland. and hope that this message will be also heard by potential companies which will participate in this tender. And this will be the first concession road in Ukraine. Also, last week I had a meeting with company Kapsch, and we will go further in this. So now I see you here, so probably it's good move that we are doing, in a good way. Another very important issue that we are facing now is to open transportation by rivers. This will ease all the other ways of transportation, and we are targeting to increase to double or to even more transportation by river vessels. We have quite a developed railway system which also needs to be restructured, and we are also doing this now. We are corporatize our Ukrainian railway system, and all in all we are also moving in all directions to introduce legislative changes which allow more investments in the country. Country needs more investments, we need more money coming into the country, and therefore we are trying to change the investment climate in the country, and we are very much succeeding in this way. Efficiency, ecology, and safe transport, these are our values, and by this message I'd like to stress that we, as Ukraine, we expect understanding and support from you, all of you, and on this way to united Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You have a lot on your plate, so thank you for that intervention. Let me move now, if I can, to an initiative which we've heard mentioned several times today, including by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the Lima Paris Action Agenda. There are 11 initiatives under this, and the purpose is to mobilize different sectors in transport to deliver the kind of change needed to achieve the climate change targets that are being discussed in COP21. Those 11 initiatives are the International Association of Public Transport, by the International Union of Railways, by UN Habitat Urban Electric Mobility Initiative, by the International Civil Aviation Organization Air Transport Action Group. There's a Global Fuel Economy Initiative, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition on Green Freight Initiative, the European Cyclists Federation and the World Cycling Alliance, Cooperation for Urban Mobility in the Developing World, the World Association for Waterborne Transport Infrastructure, the World Road Association, and we heard from Mr. Senard, the Paris Process on Mobility and Climate Change. We have today representatives of 4 of those initiatives present, who will each make a very brief presentation to give us a flavour of what these initiatives hope to accomplish. Let me begin by inviting, on behalf of the International Association of Public Transport, Mr. Alain Flausch, please, to address you.
Good morning, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests and colleagues. I'm speaking today on behalf of the International Association of Public Transport, but basically it's that I'm speaking on behalf of all the operating company, transport authority and industry which are making the supply chain of public transportation, but also the billions of people that are using public transportation every year. COP21 for us is nothing very special, although the challenge is very special and we want this to be achieved. But basically, from the very outset, what we thought was that we could show to the world that public transport people are really active on this. And what we did in a few months, we collected commitment, pledges from hundreds of organizations. We have 350 commitment, which goes from extending a new line of bus, of tramway or metro, building a new line, building new vehicles, buying new vehicles, electrification of bus. So you see numbers of commitment they've been able to take. And I think what I take as a lesson is that, yes, civil society, without any influence from the decision maker, is able to come up with really pioneering commitment, much ahead, I would say, from our elected representative. And I think it should be highlighted now during the COP21 process, but later on also, because as you know, COP21 is only the beginning of everything. Once you will be a fixed, good and ambitious target, it will be time for implementing it. And I think in this implementation phase, we absolutely need to work with civil society. And this is an invitation to government, since I'm in front of a governmental representative, to work together later. And if I can take advantage of this, you know, public transport is really great ingredient for the future of, and for the reduction and the mitigation of CO2 emission. And if I can make you a recommendation or a request, please, before Paris, during Paris, and after Paris, be brave, be ambitious, be listening to the civil society, and heavily invest in shared transportation. That will certainly help the generation to come and avoid unsustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flausch. I'm going to take our speakers in rotation, and if time permits later, if there are questions or comments, we can come to those. The second speaker that I invite to the platform is Mr. Jean-Pierre Loubinou on behalf of the International Union of Railways.
Ladies, gentlemen, ministers, dear José and Pat, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you with a few words today. Indeed, UIC, the International Union of Railways, is gathering 240 railway undertakings around 100 countries on the continents. As demand of transport continues to grow, and the OECD figures show this clearly, it is also clear that the world is needing to follow a new pattern of growth, served by truly sustainable transport systems. And this needs a better balance between the environmental, social and economic considerations, but this needs as well a better balance between each transport mode. And interoperability, intermodality is at the heart of sustainable transport and of accessibility. And rail. Rail offers high capacity, that's known, but also twined with the lowest environmental impact of any major transport mode. And for these reasons, rail can be the backbone of sustainable transport in a better balanced transportation mix. Rail can provide an important part of the solution to the climate change. It means greater efficiency, it means decarbonizing power, and it means achieving a more sustainable balance between transport modes. You know, since 1975, the specific energy consumption of CO2 emissions from the rail sector over the world have reduced about 1/2. But we know that continued improvement is needed. And this is for this reason that I'm proud to say that on behalf of the UIC, the Railway World Community, 3 targets have been committed. First is to achieve a reduction in specific final energy consumption from train operations of 60% by 2050. Second is to achieve a reduction in specific average CO2 emissions from train operations of 75% by 2050. And further to these, we are seeking, of course, the appropriate partnerships to deliver the third target and a more sustainable balance between transport modes and market shares. These targets are ambitious, but I truly believe that they are achievable in a green economy perspective. It is important to note that sustainable transport is supported by a strong economic case, and with the International Energy Agency, we have estimated that all these can result in $70 trillion savings by 2050, which I think is demonstrating a very virtuous cycle of investment. On the 28th of November, 12 trains will converge from 12 capitals of the world into Paris, with a special reception at the UIC headquarters to officialize this declaration. We will also be very proud to welcome on the 6th of December the PPMC Transportation Day, and on the 7th of December the high-level group of the United Nations for Sustainable Transport. Thank you for your attention and obviously for your support.
And thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Let me now invite to the podium Sheila Watson on behalf of the Global Fuel Economy Initiative.
Good morning. It is an honour and a pleasure to address you here today. There are currently around 1 billion vehicles on the world's roads. By 2050, that number will probably be twice as many, and 90% of that growth will be in what we currently deem emerging economies. Improved personal mobility can bring substantial personal and economic benefits. However, this massive increase in vehicle numbers is wholly unsustainable. It's unsustainable in terms of congestion, in terms of pollution and health, in terms of energy supply and energy security, and in terms of resource waste at an individual and, of course, a national level. And, of course, it's unsustainable in terms of CO2 and the climate. The Global Fuel Economy Initiative works towards mitigating some of those negative effects of the fleet growth through improved vehicle fuel economy. We work in countries to share best practice in fuel economy policy. Our work is practical, measurable, capacity building, and it has multiple benefits. We've shown that simply by adopting existing cost-effective fuel economy technologies, it's possible to reduce average fuel consumption in light-duty vehicles by 50% by 2050, and we term this our 50 by 50 target. Achieving that alone would save us up to 2 gigatons of CO2 from 2050. It would also help to clean up our air, reduce our global oil dependency, and save us $2 trillion net in unused fuel just by 2025. Resources which could be used elsewhere in our schools, our hospitals, or to promote new mobility solutions. So improved fuel economy is a win-win, and yet the world is not on track even to reach the target I've described, and particularly not in the markets outside the OECD. And that's really worrying. So we must take advantage of 2015 as a huge opportunity to get a step change in action. The UN's post-2015 framework, the Lima-Paris Transport Action Agenda are all pointing to fuel efficiency as an important initiative. We're engaging with 50 countries currently. We want to double that number to 100. And our campaign, 100 countries for 50 by 50, which we launched here yesterday, is the way in which we hope to generate real momentum for change at COP21. It's just one of several ways in which we'll be reaching out to promote this important issue. Countries which work with us, and I encourage all of you here to please consider doing that, will realise resource, health, economic, financial and CO2 benefits. And at the same time, that will help to put us on the world on a path to sustainable mobility. We're really excited by the opportunities that 2015 will offer. I hope that you share in that enthusiasm, and I hope that you'll join us in our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila Watson. Our fourth initiative that we hear from, the final one in this sequence, is Sophie Punte to talk to us about the Green Freight Initiative.
Good morning, Excellencies and Ministers. I'm very pleased to be here today to speak to you about the Global Green Freight Action Plan. As you know, freight is growing explosively. We're seeing that freight is also inefficient. For example, in many developing countries, 40% of the trucks run empty. And this is costing countries and it's costing business. And finally, the impacts on climate change and air pollution is enormous. We must find a way to tackle these challenges. And governments, of course, can help to do this by better infrastructure, policies and standards, and institutional framework. But there is another way, and that is through green freight programs. Green freight programs are public-private partnerships that empower business to do the right thing. It helps them use cleaner fuels and vehicles, improve their freight movement, and choose the most efficient mode. How do these programs do this? They help the companies set the targets, decide on which actions to take, account for emissions, and collaborate with each other to achieve double-digit emission reductions. And in return, they're recognized through awards, labels, and publicity. One of the most successful green freight programs is Smartway in the US. Over the past 10 years, they've managed to save $16 billion and managed to reduce the emissions. That's the equivalent of keeping 10 million cars off the road for an entire year. The numbers speak for themselves. And what's the strength of programs like this is that they help business and environment. So what we're trying to do through the Global Green Freight Action Plan is build on the existing programs, like in the US, Mexico, Korea, China, Netherlands, France, UK, initiatives across the marine and air sector, to bring more programs in the world. So what we want to achieve with this is a global green freight action plan that has more countries adopt green freight programs. And we're calling on you countries to include in your efforts on climate and clean air green freight programs. At the moment there are 13 countries, and our call is to double the number of countries that adopt these programs. What it will do, it will help your countries improve the energy efficiency, reduce emissions, both climate and air pollutants, but most importantly, it will help you to empower these businesses to become more competitive. And what our action plan helps you do, we have the tools, the partners, and many examples that we can build on. And if there's one thing I think you should consider in leading up to the COP21 is to look at green freight programs, and we're there to help you. Thank you very much.
Sophie Punte, thank you for that. For any of the ministers or ministries who are here who are interested in these initiatives, the full list of contacts is available through ITF Secretariat, and each can then pursue their bilateral contacts as appropriate. Let me return now to our ministerial interventions and to invite Mr. Jan-Bert Justra from the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment in the Netherlands, please, to address us.
Thank you. We underscore the message of Ban Ki-moon to accelerate efforts to green transport. And I'm here to express, on behalf of the Dutch government, our support for the Lima-Paris Action Agenda and for its four leading partners, the French presidency to COP21, the Peruvian presidency of COP21, the Office of the United Nations Secretary General, and the UNFCCC Secretariat. We aim to provide political support to the Lima-Paris Action Agenda for transport, and the Dutch government was invited to become a transport champion and lend its support to the Lima-Paris Action Agenda. We welcome this invitation to help, assist, accelerate and scale up climate action in this sector. We also look forward to working with others in specific areas like green freight, the waterborne transport and intelligent transport systems. We welcome other supportive multi-stakeholder initiatives on transport and climate change, like the Paris Process on Mobility and Climate Change that was launched yesterday here on ITF. And we are eager to offer our support to catalyze action in the transport sector from all over the world. We are committed in doing so, as we believe that concrete actions by the transport sector itself will inspire negotiating parties to come forward with an ambition agreement that will leverage more large-scale action on transport and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention, which is also important in the context of the fact that I think you are the early next year, or in the course of next year, the upcoming presidency of the European Council. And so in addition to the Dutch focus, you will have a wider European leadership role, which brings me nicely to someone who plays a European leadership role, and that is the European Commissioner for Transport, Commissioner Bulc. You're very welcome here today, Commissioner, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and let me at the beginning congratulate the Presidency for the declaration from ministers that you put together, and I believe that this is a very solid foundation for future global cooperation. But as far as the topic of today is concerned, let me say that EU stays really committed to the decarbonization agenda that is well represented in all our cross-structural strategic projects like Energy Union, Digital Agenda, Single European Market, Urban Agenda, and of course, especially in my portfolio, to Single European Transport Area, where we try to include the content of decarbonization in everything that we do and think about. And let me just share with you a couple of facts. First of all, transport in Europe consumes 34% of all the energy, out of which 93% is oil-based. And we directly contribute to 24% of all CO2 emissions. So yes, we do have a serious challenge, and yes, we are addressing this challenge together with all other stakeholders. And as I said before, we are committed to the target we put to ourselves in the past, which means 20% of reduction by 2030 and 60% of reduction by 2050, comparing to the figures in 1990. But not only talking about it, I would like to share with you a couple of the initiatives that are already in place or they're underway. And I'm, of course, inviting you to join me in this. And by all means, I hope you will invite me as well to join your initiatives, that we together can build a much more positive future as far as the decarbonization is concerned. First of all, very important move is in the aviation package. Aviation package and aviation being as a core strategy for this year. We hope to succeed in CES2+ initiative, which is contributing to decarbonization of the sector quite a bit. The second one that we are working on for the 2016 is the road package. Road package will stress very strongly all different options that digitalization brings to the road transport and also contributes directly to the decarbonization. At the same time, we are very much stimulating the use of alternative fuels based on the renewable energy, where electrification will play a specifically important role of all transport modes and especially of the road transport. At the same time, we are very much encouraging the project together with our partners from the railway sector, Shift to Rail, and we have already had a very good presentation on that. So I would just like to confirm that we see a great opportunity in the rail solutions to lower the carbonization impact that we are causing through transport. The next one, which is equally important, is of course research and innovation. Research and innovation, and our contribution to that is that we're really stimulating now the Horizon 2020 and other initiatives related to that to develop new propulsion systems, alternative fuels, and also batteries and other ways of storage for storing electrical energy, because we know that, of course, this will be one of the major challenges. Along those lines, we have already made a couple of smaller steps which are equally important. For example, directive on design of vehicles, especially the trucks, which we hope will bring up to 10% of reduction of CO2 just by different design of the trucks, and several smaller initiatives of that magnitude. But what is really important is that we join forces and that we really build this together in all different layers and all different levels, because equally important are technical contribution as well as behavior change that we need to all participate in. Of course, the policies and frameworks that you're all asking for, and I know that with an open dialogue we will be moving into the right direction. And of course, it's responsible investments that I'm inviting us all, that we keep that in mind whenever we do any kind of investment moves. But at the end, let me just say one more time, yes, this is a big challenge, but based on the first really encouraging results from the car industry, where targets were high but the industry responded, and European industry, due to that challenge, really gained the global lead again. I believe that targets do make sense, but I also agree that we need to strike them together, and we need to agree on them, and then, of course, commit ourselves to them. And in this particular segment, we all are learning that it's not really about the power, but it's about the intelligence and the holistic solutions. And this is where I believe that the power will come from, and today's discussions are very encouraging, so I'm looking forward to our future cooperations.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to signal to you, we'll have you out in plenty of time for lunch, but we will overrun our schedule a little bit to accommodate our speakers. And I would like next to invite Susan Curland, who had indicated earlier, but please now address us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and I'd like to thank the summit organizers and the ITF for putting on such an impressive event. I'm pleased to join you here today on behalf of Secretary of Transportation Anthony Fox, and I thank you for recognizing the importance of transportation in the global economy. The impacts of climate change affect every country, and President Obama has made climate change a top priority for the U.S. At his direction, the U.S. is taking a global approach to address climate change. The President and the U.S. are fully engaged in the effort to deliver a strong agreement in Paris, an agreement that would establish for the first time an ambitious, durable climate regime that applies to all countries. On March 31st, the U.S. announced a target to reduce climate pollution 26 to 28% below 2005 levels in 2025. This target is both ambitious and achievable, grounded in an intensive analysis of what can be done under existing law. It is consistent with achieving deep, economy-wide reductions over 80% by 2050. It roughly doubles the pace of emission reductions for the period 2020 through 2025 as compared to 2005 through 2020. And we have several ongoing efforts within the U.S., and I thank some of the speakers who have referenced some of them, and I'll just mention a couple of them very briefly. At the President's direction, the EPA and NHTSA worked with the U.S. auto industry to develop new joint fuel economy greenhouse gas emission standards for light-duty vehicles. The rules for the joint program cover vehicles in model years 2012 through 2016 and model years 2017 and beyond. Under the program, average new car and light truck fuel economy is expected to double by 2025 and slashing greenhouse gas emissions by 6 billion metric tons over the lifetime of the vehicles sold during this period. In 2010, the President directed EPA and NHTSA to develop joint greenhouse gas emissions and fuel efficiency standards for medium and heavy-duty vehicles, model years 2014 through 2018. This program set first-of-a-kind standards that were expected to save a projected 530 million barrels of oil and to reduce carbon emissions by about 270 million metric tons. NHTSA and EPA plan to issue rules in 2016 for the second phase of these standards. And we are also committed at ICAO to the development of a meaningful CO2 standard for aircraft for the implementation in the U.S. to incentivize faster development of technology and to serve as a basis for ensuring that less efficient aircraft and engine technologies are eliminated over time. And as part of our Next Gen initiative, the FAA is leading a number of efforts in collaborating with the aviation industry to develop and improve technology that results in better fuel efficiency and reduced emissions and noise. Next Gen is expected to save 5.8 billion gallons of fuel through 2030. And we also continue to work to pursue alternative fuel options across all transportation modes, including electric-powered cars on our roads, liquefied natural gas locomotives, hybrid energy transit buses, alternative fuel-going ocean vessels in the U.S. flag fleet, and use of alternative fuels in commercial aviation. And we are also working to create more transportation choices in communities, which will allow travelers and businesses to reduce their energy use and save money. We are doing this through major mass transit capital investments, improved pedestrian bicyclist accommodations and safety, and similar smart investments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that very interesting panorama of what's happening in the United States. And I note the message at the core that you will be doubling the pace of emission reductions through the sum of these parts. Thank you for that intervention. Let me turn, if I could, to invite the Minister from Moldova, please, did you indicate you wish to speak? No? It's fine. Then let me go to Norway. I know it may have been a comment or a question. It may be out of sequence. My apologies if it is, but please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President and Secretary General and dear colleagues. I am an optimist, and I think I speak on behalf of the Norwegian government as well. We are optimists. For many years, we were talking about ambitious targets. We were talking about bold goals. But also, for many years, the political mentality due to acting climate-friendly was maybe too much idealistic appeals about acting eco-friendly. You should leave your car, you should take the bus. And it was much about making sufferers. To act climate-friendly, to save the world, you have to give up something. And of course, that means a political risk to take action. Happily, we now see that the whole debate is turned into more into realism and positiveness. We see that solutions are there. We see that it's fully possible to make policies, to take actions that actually means that people's everyday life gets more convenient. That doing business is also about convenience and at the same time reaching the positive goals. And I get even more optimistic when I listen to CEOs in global companies like we have had here today, also talking about and showing us solutions, which makes it possible for us to progress. And just to take one example from Norway, for many years we have had kind of tax-free electrical vehicles. And for some years we didn't have much progress, but then suddenly the snowball started to roll. And last year, 15% of the new cars sold in Norway were electrical cars. And even some of the best sellers, yes, they were electrical cars. A few years ago, we were talking about new technology. Now the technology is here. And as it's been said earlier, the toolbox is here, the technology is here. It's more about taking it into use. And politics works. Also, like an example from Norway, and it's wonderful that international arenas like this is about sharing experiences. We are talking about what's going on in our countries. We are sharing solutions which are working. In our country, we have had a goal for some years now that the growth of the transport in the biggest cities should be taken by public transport, cycling or walking. And even Oslo, as one of the maybe the biggest growing city in the most growing city in Europe, we are reaching that target. We are at the same level as just a few years ago, even though we've had lots of new inhabitants in the city. And why are we succeeding? Yes, because we are putting our investments into public transport. We are buying new rolling stock. The trains, the trams, the buses are going more frequently. It is more convenient to people to choose the climate-friendly way. And as we all see that in our country, in your cities and your countries, you're putting politics into life, and you're getting results. And that makes me come to my final point and message. Therefore, as we are seeing the results and the solutions are there, the technology is theirs, the goals are reachable, and people are still happy, they are not suffering. Yes, then it should be a less risk to make a clear statement in Paris in 2015 this year, to make a legally binding agreement for all the member states here and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Let me invite now, we have two speakers remaining in this session. Mr. Klaus Tilmes, please, on behalf of World Bank.
Thank you very much, dear Ministers, Delegates and Secretary General. This is indeed, 2015 is a very unique year. It's not just the year of COP21, but it's also the 10-year review of Aid for Trade in Geneva. It is the occasion for the Finance for Development Summit in Addis. It's the SDG Summit in New York, COP21, and the Nairobi Trade Conference. So in other words, a lot of the topics that we have talked about here are coming together in a very unique way. It's also a question of how do we actually meet these expectations, and I take the view from Norway. Of course, we have every reason to be optimistic. At the same time, we need to figure out ways of actually translating these climate commitments into credible job creation opportunities and economic growth. After all, speaking from the perspective of the developing countries, the task is immense. 600 million jobs need to be created by the year 2030, most of them in the private sector. And most of them are absolutely essential in order to actually address extreme poverty and shared prosperity. Trade, tourism, and transport, I have to say, is a really unique and very powerful combination. It's a combination that calls for integrated solutions and coordinated action at multiple levels. I couldn't agree more that market forces, technology changes, disruptive new business models, and changes in consumer behaviors are going to be the most powerful drivers for change. There's no question about this. And the question then from our point of view is, as policymakers, how do we actually adjust our own understanding of what is possible quickly enough, and what is our role that we can contribute to this? From a trade point of view, I think what is really needed is decisive collective action, particularly in terms of approving the trade facilitation agreement by the end of the year. I think coming from the trade angle, I have to also say that infrastructure investments alone will not do the trick. I think we need a smart, soft solution to actually cope with this growth in trading both goods and services. From our point of view, supply chain reliability is critical. We need to reduce the fragmentation through regional development corridors that have been very much at the forefront of our mind as well as on the UN's mind. And we need to reduce the overall footprint on the environment. A really big risk in all of this enthusiasm, however, is that these new emerging patterns of connectivity are very much oriented towards those countries that are central and close to the main routes. So special attention needs to be paid to landlocked countries and small island states where the risk of being left behind is quite important. From the tourism perspective, because our part of the World Bank also covers tourism, what I found very encouraging is actually the potential that we have in terms of tapping and developing new national as well as regional tourist potential. There's disruptive potential that also, I think, allows us to deal with the surge of tourism demand. After all, that is something that is a big driving force. I think measurement in terms of just seeing what sustainable tourism might be about is still a challenge that needs to be tackled. And finally, again, a call for governmental coordination, particularly around the mobility of travelers. I think that is something that we haven't talked about much here, but it's really in the back of our minds that is a really key important policy change. So in closing, there's huge potential, and I think what I'm particularly impressed with, and I would like to leave with you, is that the benefits of these changes will disproportionately accrue to developing countries. I think that's where the greatest catch-up is, and that is where the greatest potential is to actually make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call on our final speaker. We heard the 4 initiatives earlier, which were focused very much in the transport domain, and of course we have 2 big themes, and the other one is tourism. So our concluding short presentation on behalf of the World Travel and Tourism Council, from its President and CEO, I invite Mr. David Scousel, please, to address us.
Mr. Chairman, Secretary General, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to address you. The World Travel and Tourism Council is the private sector industry association comprising the chief executives of the world's leading travel and tourism companies. We work alongside the United Nations World Tourism Organization, who represents some 125 governments, and together the Secretary General and myself visit with presidents and prime ministers, 73 of them in the last 3 years. Travel and tourism accounts for nearly 10% of the world's GDP, some $7.6 trillion annually, and supports 277 million jobs, which is 1 in 11 jobs on the planet. Our latest forecasts point to annual growth in our sector of 4% per year over the next 10 years. This is outpacing the global economy by 1 percentage point. This will bring enormous economic and social benefits to populations across the world. And over this next decade, 80 million new jobs will be created by travel and tourism. However, this growth brings enormous challenges. We, as with other industry sectors, need to decouple this growth from resource consumption. Tourism, and in particular the transport element of it, is perceived as having a significant negative impact on the planet. We need to address this urgently, not only by undertaking positive steps to reduce our impact, clearly, but also by communicating better what we are doing more effectively. And there are 5 areas where we need to focus. The first is that we need to be accountable and responsible. By improving our management systems for measuring impact and by sharing this information widely with customers, we can promote efficiency and demonstrate leadership. Secondly, we need to commit to local community sustainable growth and capacity building. Communities with which we interact are vital partners in our value proposition. And by including these communities in all aspects of our climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, we can transform shareholder value into stakeholder value. Thirdly, we need to educate our customers and stakeholders to drive consumer awareness and demand for the changes that we make. Fourth, responsibility does not end with an individual company's boundaries. We need to embrace the entire supply chain, both upstream and downstream. And finally, and most importantly, we have to focus on innovation, capital investment and infrastructure. Incremental change will not be sufficient. We need a transformational change of thinking in how we do business and how we grow sustainably. I'm delighted that this year the International Transport Forum has decided to focus on those links between transport, tourism and trade. An integrated approach will be vital as we strive to grow sustainably and address these challenges of the future. Working in silos will not be effective. Public-public partnerships between different ministries of a government are critical to the private sector as they develop policies which encourage growth. Led by your President or your Prime Minister, a coordinated approach to managing our growth and mitigating any climate change impact is absolutely key. Your Excellencies, Travel and Tourism is delighted to partner with you to ensure the successful future of our mutually independent sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will be talking to you later about some household details, but first I'd been asked to do a short summary of what we discussed today, and given the hour which risks to detain you from your lunch, and given the variety of material, I'm not going to attempt some kind of global summary. I think I could do well simply to quote 2 or 3 brief things. The message of Ban Ki-moon: we must do more. We must accelerate our efforts. We must find new green solutions. Or to say to the ministers today who adopted the declaration here at this ITF forum, to encourage the mainstreaming of low-carbon transport in global policies on climate change. And then to understand from the variety of interventions we've had from business leaders, from political leaders, from civil society leaders, that partnership counts. Governments, industry and civil society working together can do things better together than they would acting alone. I think there is a sense now, and it was remarked by the Norwegian intervention earlier, that we're in a zone that combines ambition with realism. And we understand that the ambition can be facilitated by solutions because we have a growing toolkit of possibilities. And the key message, we can have growth and we can also have sustainability, and that, I think, is the core message. Thank you for your cooperation. I want to thank all of those speakers who have contributed, and it is now my pleasure to hand the chair back to our President, Mr. Simon Bridges, Minister from New Zealand.
Well, thank you very much, my fellow ministers, distinguished guest speakers, and of course you, Pat, for your excellent moderation and all of your interventions this morning in this session. Like Pat, it's foolhardy to attempt some kind of global summary of what has happened here, but I think we've all heard that call for leadership, as was said by Mr. Senna of Michelin, that urge for perhaps audacity, but also a clear sense that that does not need to be an either-or, growth or lowering emissions. It can, I think we'd all agree, be both. And for governments, that is, as Mr. Capsh, I think, said, the what, the clear signals, the predictability, the certainty, the pathway of how we can act together. And there's many ways that we can do that, whether it's fossil fuel subsidy reform, whether it's a price on carbon or the like. But then also the clear need for partnership with the private sector, with NGOs and civil society in relation to innovation, whether in technology and smart thinking or in other ways, whether in financing indeed. And can I, like Pat, echo the words of my Norwegian friend, that there's real reason, given the discussions we've had today, that I'm sure will be ongoing, room for optimism, that we can actually achieve both growth and a lowering of emissions. So, ministers, guests, can I thank you for your contributions? Can I encourage you to continue discussions over the next day or so, and indeed in the lead up to COP21, and just remind ministers very finally of the need now for the so-called family photo. Thank you very much.
Before you disperse, if I can make one or two household announcements. At the ITF Open Cafe, which you've seen here, the Paris Lima Action Agenda will be presented now at the end of this meeting for those interested. As regards family photo, those of you who will be involved in it, the ministers, heads of delegation, corporate partnership board and keynote speakers, please stay in this room. You will need to get up from where you are, so make sure you or someone looks after any bags or papers that you have. The picture will only take a few minutes, but we need to rebuild here, so lots of this is removed, so we need to stay for a few minutes. I will talk to you again about who goes where when the scene is set, and then we go to lunch. Thank you.